What is up, weather enthusiasts? I'm your host, Pat's Path Predictor. Let's get right into the weather. Alright, so here's the situation we have for you, ladies and gentlemen. We have a lot of new updates and we have a lot of new modeling that we absolutely need to share with you. And we have a lot of things that we need to dissect and a lot of things we need to talk about in regards to potential development impacting the Lesser Antilles, Greater Antilles, and areas beyond that. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and dive right into it right here. So here's what we're going to go ahead and start off with. We're going to start off with what we have going on here, which is our European forecasting trap or tropical cyclone activity probabilities that they have pulled up for you right here. Now, granted, a lot of this is wind derived, so it's not exactly the most reliable aspect of this, but you can start to take a quick gander at it as we're looking at better and better odds of development with this system, so we can pay attention to that moving forward. So basically what we have for you right here is we have the 0Z European run in, and what you're seeing right here is pretty much tropical cyclone probabilities of and winds derived of 25 knots or 30 miles per hour or greater. And as you can already see, this is already 72 hours out, and we are already at this current point, as this tropical wave starts to come off the coast of Africa, you're already looking at a 50 to 60% probability in this region right here, so you're going to want to pay attention to that. Then moving out to 96 hours, that really starts to increase to 60 to 70% at that point. Then 120 hours out, it expands even further. Right there, and then 144 hours out, it does stretch out a bit more, but you still have those high tropical cyclone probabilities. And then a week out, the chances at least do decrease, but that doesn't mean the tropical cyclone development odds do decrease like by default or anything like that. What it means is there's more uncertainty at this current point, and we're going to want to pay attention to that as well. So that's kind of your situation that we have right here. But one thing you need to pay attention with this is the tropical storm aspect of the wind-derived data. Because as you're starting to notice right here, and we can even go back to 96 hours out, you start off with like a 5% probability of tropical storm winds like southeast of the Cabo Verde Islands. But then as you get to 120 hours out, that greatly increases to 20 to 30%. Then 6 days out, 30 to 40%. So you're really seeing these big increases moving forward right here. And I actually want to hold off and go back to 144 hours just to show you this. Let's go ahead and go to a couple of days ago because we were taking a quick gander at this. We'll show you the data that we have pulled up for this. A couple of days ago, were only looking at like a 5% probability of tropical storm strength moving forward with this. Then going to yesterday, which is 168 hours out, we can pull that up. We start to increase a little bit to like 10 to 20% chance, but it's really been the last 24 hours that I've seen really big ramp-ups right here with this. And as you get to about 0Z right here, you're looking at pretty much now a 30 to 40% probability of a tropical storm strength system, at least approaching the Lesser Antilles. So that's something you're going to want to pay attention to that. Now, if you go a bit further to the out, those chances do decrease because of uncertainty and all of that stuff. But by and large, this is just the first indicator that we're paying attention to right here, and we'll show you a lot more later. But basically, if you look at the tropical cyclone, tropical storm chances, just on the European wind-derived data alone, they've really started to spike and really started to turn up as more data and information comes in. So we're going to have to pay attention to that. Shifting over to the ensemble runs, because this is the thing I really want to get into today, because we had the 12Z run from yesterday and the 0Z run for today. The 12Z run did back off a little bit. I saw David Schlauhauer post a tweet talking about that, but I was kind of reaching out to him in DMs. I was telling him, hey, David, you're going to want to watch this wave. He's like, I'm not sure if it's going to do anything. Pat, we'll have to pay it. I'm not sure. I was like, David, wait for the 0Z and the 12Z runs for tomorrow, and then we can come up with a judgment. Because sometimes when you see weaker runs like that, it can be a little bit off. It can kind of be like a one-time thing. If this is a trend where we continue to see this going forward, I would have said, yeah, this is probably a weakening trend. We're going to want to watch that still, but I wouldn't be as worried about it. But the 0Z run really came in and really showed that this system really has a lot of support for development. And I'll go ahead and show you that in a few minutes. But I want to go ahead and start with the derived 12Z data right here. So this is what we have 6 days out right here. And actually, I want to go ahead and go back to 5 days out very quickly, just to kind of start. This is the genesis that we have over here in the main development region. That's something you're going to want to pay attention to right here as the system starts to organize and develop. We're now 4 to 5 days away from this whole thing starting to get its act together, so you're going to want to pay attention to it. It's going to start off as a low pressure system southwest of the Cabo Verde Islands, and then things will start ramping up from there, going to 144 hours out. You're starting to notice the power starts to show a bit more. You're noticing a lot of these ensembles really start to turn up quite a bit with the intensity, so that's something you're going to want to pay attention to. But it kind of starts off a little bit slow and then ramps up as it approaches the Lesser and Greater Antilles. But going to 168 hours out at this point, you're looking at this. It's really starting to pick up in speed. It's really starting to pick up more so in power, but I am noticing a bit of the drop-off in terms of the ensembles right here. So that was something David was kind of mentioning, and he was kind of trying to figure out what was going on with that. So that's something to pay attention to as well. But yeah, a little bit of a drop off right here. I wasn't too worried about that. I was like, wait for the 0Z, we'll pay attention to that. But then 192 hours out, you start noticing a lot of these runs get weaker and all of that. Part of it's because of geography. In fact, part of the reason why this run was so weak, in my opinion, is because of geography. Land interaction absolutely disrupts developing tropical cyclones, and as a lot of these model ensembles head towards the Lesser Antilles, towards Puerto Rico, towards Hispaniola and those areas as well, I was thinking, yeah, part of it has to be geography. I still want to pay attention to that. And then going to 216 hours out, which is 9 days out, you do notice some power with some of these ensembles, but the majority of them remain weak. Heck, there's even a little bit of a split where some of them enter the Caribbean right there, so you're going to want to pay attention to that. But what you're noticing with this is, based on what we've seen over the last couple of days, the European has shifted further and further to the south, because before we were thinking, okay, Lesser Antilles, and then stays north of the Greater Antilles. Now we're thinking, okay, maybe it hits the Lesser Antilles, maybe Puerto Rico, the Dominican Republic. After that, it's a bit uncertain, so we'll have to pay attention to that. And then going to 240 hours out, what you're noticing at this current point, this is now 10 days out, you're noticing a pretty definitive split in the models right here. About half of the European ensembles want this to impact the Lesser Antilles and then move out to sea, but the other half, particularly the other half that stays further to the south, actually wants the system to keep going, impact Puerto Rico, the Dominican Republic, potentially Cuba, and then at the Bahamas as it starts to slowly make that turn, but it kind of delays and it impacts more people. So you're noticing that definitive split, at least early on right here. So that's something to pay attention to. Part of it is because we're trying to figure out if there's going to be a ridge or a trough that's going to develop in that region. So you're going to want to keep an eye on it. And depending on if the high pressure system and the Azores system weakens enough to allow for the system to kind of stay out to sea, we'll have to pay attention to that. Right now, it's too early to determine beyond a shadow of a doubt what exactly is going to happen. Now shifting over to the 0Z, man, things get interesting going there. We'll go ahead and go back to this, and then we'll go to the 0Z run to show you what's going on. So this is 96 hours out. This is pretty much around cyclogenesis at this current point in parts of the MDR southwest of the Cabo Verde Islands. Very concentrated, noticing a lot more ensembles here than the 12Z, and that's something to watch and something to pay very closely attention to. Because one thing I'm noticing with this is the system does not develop right away. It doesn't get its act together, and it doesn't organize until it gets closer to the Lesser Antilles. That is a very big concern for me, because the closer the system gets towards the land as it starts to develop and organize, I would argue the more at threat that a lot of people, particularly in the Bahamas, the Greater Antilles, heck, even in the eastern coast of the United States would be, because this system, while it's weak, is going to move more to the west. Weaker systems tend to not follow troughs as much, and they don't tend to go out to sea as much. And then as you start to pick up with strength, that kind of increase that pull, and that's what ultimately allows like a lot of major hurricanes that develop very far east in the main development region to move into parts out to sea. That's pretty much the general gist of it. That's what happened with Hurricane Lee. That's what happened with Hurricane Larry until it impacted Canada. Same with Hurricane Sam in 2021. There's a lot of examples I can make with this, but you're noticing with this shift right here that you're going to want to pay attention to, and we'll go ahead and show you this day by day how this operates. But now looking at this now, you're looking at a lot of ensembles. Like this is a ton of ensembles that blow up. This is like 25 to 30 ensembles from the European that's really just popping all over the place, and it's a very concentrated signal. And when you see something like that, that should be screaming to you, okay, this is really happening. You're going to want to pay attention to this. So that's something you're going to want to keep an eye on. And then going to 144 hours out is when this system starts picking up in speed. It's still very concentrated. Now, granted, a lot of these are relatively weak. That's because it's going to take its time to organize, take its time to strengthen, where a lot of these are like 30 to 40 knots of wind with this. So this is like tropical depression to weak tropical storm strength in terms of its wind speed. The pressure's like 1,000 and averages like around 1,007 or so with this, so that's tropical depression strength. Then going to 168 hours out, you're noticing still relatively weak, still going to take its time to organize and develop. There's still some conditions you're going to want to pay attention to with this, but it's still very concentrated, and you're noticing that shift further and further to the south. It's inching further and further to the south. Like, matter of fact, let's go ahead and go back to the 12Z to show you this for comparison. Before, you're noticing a lot less signals, but they were more so north, more to the north, and they kind of shift more to the north. What you're noticing with this signal now at 12 at the 0Z with this is it's a lot more concentrated. It's a lot more concentrated. It's impacting the Lesser Antilles quite a bit more. You're going to want to pay attention to that as well. So that's kind of what you're looking at. Then 192 hours out, you're noticing a pretty definitive split in the runs already. You're noticing about half of them kind of eclipse the Lesser Antilles and then start to slowly turn out to sea, but you're also noticing another half of them kind of staying in the Northwestern Caribbean, impacting Puerto Rico, Hispaniola. You're going to want to pay attention to that because that split is going to be very key as to who's going to get impacted and how bad are the impacts going to get. So that's kind of what we're looking at right here. Then going to 9 days out at this current point. 9 days out, that split becomes a bit more defined. But what I'm noticing is, interestingly, the stronger signals with this are actually further to the south. Now, granted, it's going to take time to organize and strengthen. If it has a shot, quite frankly, the Northwest-Eastern Caribbean is probably the best place to do it. Because, yes, there is a lot of shear in the Eastern Caribbean, but the Northeast Caribbean is the area that doesn't have as much shear. So that's something intriguing and something to pay attention to. And if that's the case, Puerto Rico, you're in the line of fire. Hispaniola, you're in the line of fire. Cuba, you're going to want to pay attention to this. You could be in the line of fire. The Bahamas, you're absolutely going to be in the line of fire with this. And going to 240 hours out, increased power on a lot of areas right here. You're noticing a lot more ensembles with power to them. Before we were noticing like a lot of ensembles, but only with a few power. Let's go ahead and zoom in on this just to show you this real quickly. Here's what we have: 969, 998, 992, 1000, 1002, 997, 958. You're noticing more and more of these ensembles showing strengthening, showing a lot of room to grow and breathe, especially as you hit those warmer waters, especially as you hit those better conditions as you move out of the Caribbean. So that's something you're going to want to pay attention to moving forward. I know I've spent like the last 10-ish minutes talking about ensembles, but I'm talking about this with you guys because these are the trends and this is what we're showing right here. And there is so much model support with this that I kind of have to look at these ensembles and dissect it because the operational runs still haven't exactly caught up to the ensembles, but that's going to take probably another day or two for them to start to, so you're going to want to pay attention to this, because I know there's a lot of people in the comments saying, oh, the operational runs aren't showing it yet, Patrick. Why are you hyping this up? The reason I'm hyping this up is because the ensembles, like I said in yesterday's video, is the first signal. It's the first thing you look at. And then the operational run starts to catch up, and then the conditions. So that's one thing you need to continue and one thing you need to consider moving forward. But with that being said, we're going to go ahead and shift over to the conditions actually and kind of neatly wrap this up in a nice little bow, because I want to emphasize how important these conditions are going to be, and maybe it'll give us a time frame as to when this develops and when the NHC is going to tag this, because it's still a little interesting that the NHC hasn't done anything with it yet. But I think in the next day or two, because they're waiting for more data, the NHC is going to start tagging that. Actually, before I get to the conditions, just out of my own curiosity, I want to see what the GFS is going with this right here, going to the North Atlantic region right here, going to the GFS data, taking a look at the 0Z. 0Z hasn't really... It's actually picked up quite a bit with its signal right here across the board. It's still kind of broad and all of that, and there's not as many ensembles as the European. But compared to the 12Z from yesterday and the 0Z from yesterday, there's a lot more signals going for it. So it's definitely starting to catch up with the European. And then the 12Z run for today, it only goes out to 102 hours out, but you are starting to notice more ensembles picking up on it. 6Z run is a bit interesting as well. Let's go ahead and go to 10 days out just to show this. Yeah, a lot more power with these ensembles right here, folks. So the GFS is catching up to the European. It's just more divided and it's more broad with where the system is going to go. So you're seeing more model support with a lot of these areas. Let's go ahead and talk conditions very quickly. I'm not going to be able to go through all of it in depth like I normally would, but I'm going to briefly sum them up. Water temperatures, I don't really need to say that much. Starting off around 28 degrees Celsius in parts of the MDR southwest of the Cabo Verdes, and then it's moving into 28 to 27 degrees Celsius all the way until it gets to the Lesser Antilles. 27 to 28 degrees Celsius for those of you who live in the United States and her territories is 80 to 82 degrees Fahrenheit. So I want to make that point very clear so that way I could get the conversion to you guys out there as quickly as possible. But as you start to get towards Cuba, as you start to get towards the Bahamas, you're noticing warmer water starting to creep up 29, 30 degrees Celsius. And I think that's a part of the reason why you're seeing a lot of more power, especially as you move past the Dominican Republic, past Haiti, past Cuba, past Puerto Rico, the Greater Antilles. Mind you, of why this is going on and why we're seeing more strengthening after that. I think warmer water plays a pretty big factor into that. Ocean heat content also plays a big factor into this. As you look at it right here, not as much in the MDR and in parts of the Lesser Antilles, but as you move further to the west, as you move towards, especially in the southeastern portion, if you start moving further to the south, you're noticing more OHC south of Puerto Rico, the Dominican Republic, and more OHC around the Bahamas as well. So that's something else that we're going to continue to consider and something to take into account. Looking at the wind shear, just to kind of quickly show you this. Here's what we have for you right here. This is the 0Z. Where it's at going to be developing in the MDR, it's going to start off with relatively low wind shear. Yes, there might be some shear around it, kind of northeast and south of it, but part of this is because of the storm strength, and part of it is because there is a little bit of shear to the north of it, but it's going to stay far enough away to maybe potentially enhance the outflow and allow for further consolidation with the system. And especially if you see more of a southward shift with the models that we're seeing right here, it's going to really kind of take away the negative aspects of this wind shear pocket over here north of the Lesser Antilles, especially as you head towards the Caribbean, because what you're only doing with this is you're only enhancing the outflow and you're not really chipping away at the structure anymore with this. So that's a very important factor to consider, and that's going to continue all the way until you get to the Bahamas. And yes, there is a little bit of a jet streak with the shear right here, so you're gonna want to pay attention to. But you might want to pay attention, because if we do start seeing a ridge starting to build up right here, it's kind of like what the model is showing. Florida, you're going to want to pay attention to that very quickly. Lastly, we'll show you the relative humidity with the moisture. I'm not too concerned about the moisture. Yes, there's some dry air, but it's in a pretty big moisture pocket, and this easily can get mixed out. In fact, the European is saying that this is actually going to get mixed out fairly easily, so I wouldn't be too worried about the dry air this time around, but I would be watching the other conditions, and we'll continue to keep you updated on a lot of these aspects here on the Pat's Path Predictor channel moving forward. But with that being said, we're going to go ahead and close the video out right here. But if you are in the Lesser Antilles, if you are in Puerto Rico, if you're in the Dominican Republic, pay close attention to this, because this could be a very big threat for you guys. But leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you are new. The goal, as always, is to get more people engaged unleashed with weather. If you want to help out, hang out, or ask us more questions, be sure to join the Storms Unite Discord server. The link to that will be in the end screen. And with that being said, have a wonderful day, guys. Stay safe.